Hey, what's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode number 424. My name is Steve. I'm one of the co-hosts of the show, and as always, I'm joined by
Ron.
Give me back my face.
Now, if you're listening to this only, is that John?
Yes,
Is
that's
it
me.
Batman?
It's me, Batman.
Is it
and John?
Rorschach?
It's Rorschach and Batman and John.
Oh, they're all the same.
All
so
kind of
you-
the same.
got
yeah,
it.
The
Got
same
it, got it.
archetype, if you will.
Makes total sense. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Good to see you guys. Good to see you guys. Welcome to a new episode. And this week's we're getting back into our required viewing. We had our watch 'em all last week, the third of four Halloween watch 'em alls. So we're gonna get back into our trilogy of episodes upcoming here. We're gonna have our required viewings that each of us pick and be talking about a little more like recent releases, relevant stuff on TV. And today we'll be doing Ronald's pick for required viewing, which was Watchmen Chapter 1, which came out on digital last week. And we're going to do this is a rarity, guys. We've all three seen the same new release film for a pod in, recently released timelines here. So we'll be talking about the new entry in the Alien franchise called Alien Romulus as our featured review on the show in just a little bit. Hopefully you're following us on YouTube at youtube.com/movie podcast so that you can see how intricate the light setup is that Ronald has, and how amazing his tracking device is that he uses for video source.
Ronald is slowly becoming a ghost hunter.
Yeah.
his lighting setup and his motion detection camera.
This is crazy.
Like if you just left this recording and let us watch it, like live stream it, we would just see the camera going all around and like that's just following the ghost, right? That's how it works.
And all we need is for you to add some kind of thermal imaging layer to this, where it's like you can see
just
there's a cold spot,
Yeah, we'd be covered, guys.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, Ronald, get us up to speed on your required viewing pick. Why, when, how, who, all of it.
Yes. So the one that I have picked for this week is based on a comic book. One of my favorites, Alan Moore's The Watchmen Chapter 1. No, that's not the name of not the name of the comic. Watchmen is the name of the comic. Released in 10 volumes back when it came out.
12, I think.
12?
10? I don't know.
Yeah,
I think it's 12.
10 or 12.
Yeah.
Combined at some point, and then adapted several times. Like there was an animated version that was just one person playing all the voices. And that came out around the time of the Zack Snyder adaptation, which to me, I loved it. I loved Zack Snyder's adaptation of Watchmen. This was at the point where I was like, man, this Zack Snyder, he really can do no wrong. And then he did a lot of wrong. But I'm just saying, it was a very good movie.
I can confirm that it's 12 just because I just looked at my graphic novel that I have.
You got your graphic novel.
And of course it's 12 because it corresponds with the watch or clock face. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. 12 volumes. Now, this animated version seems to be maybe the first 4 or so. It seems because I think there's, or maybe half.
It's weird.
Half.
I was going to ask this question because I had trouble.
It's called half. It's supposed to be a 2-part thing. Everything I've seen indicates it's a 2-part movie. So we're going to get another chapter. But I think if you look at the comic, which if we want to do a little micro, let's get physical. Got to hold it up. Oh, it's doing the thing that it does to you, Ronald.
Oh,
I'm gone. Well, just believe it. You've seen this in every bookstore in America.
We
The
believe
Watchmen graphic novel. This is the one I bought, I don't know how many years ago. I probably borrowed a friend's copy back in the day and then finally bought one maybe 20 years ago. And then I read it a couple more times. And my son got to the age where he wanted to read it. And then I actually had to borrow it back from him to start reading around this. So it's like, it's a very readable graphic novel. It's a very engrossing story. But I was flipping through it today to try to figure out like where are they really? And it's like they're kind of halfway. They're about to the end of issue 5 of 12, but certain plot lines have kind of advanced A
Yeah.
little bit more than that, and
Yeah.
other things you can tell they're maybe going to condense or they're going to change around. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if maybe chapter 2 is a little bit longer than this, which is like under an hour and a half. Um, but I don't know. Maybe they'll continue to condense it and keep it kind of moving. So it's still not like a full adaptation of
Yeah.
the story or of the comic, but just from a visual standpoint, it's maybe the closest visual adaptation we've had of this material. Were you familiar with the graphic novel before you saw the? I guess you were just saying you saw the movie first, right? Or had you read the
Me?
graphic novel? Yeah.
No, I'd read the graphic novel maybe 3 times before I
Okay.
saw the movie. But it happened. I'll never forget it. I was doing radio in DC, and we were talking about just comics and how much I like comics. I was just randomly reading stuff. And a guy was like, "Have you ever read Watchmen?" I'm like, "Oh, what?" And then he brought it in, asked me to read it, and it really was pretty incredible. And then he's like, "Oh, there's a movie coming out at some point." I'm like, "What of this? How? It's so weird and dense, and it's like anti comic books kind of in a way, like not anti like I hate comics, but it was like."
Yeah.
It was a different approach. It was a different approach that we're now seeing in like The Boys, and we're seeing in Invincible and stuff like that. But this was the first to kind of analyze, the genre as a whole from this different perspective in the mainstream.
Yeah, and to
Um,
kind of comment on what was happening with comics at this time, like
yeah,
there was a sort of Alan Moore, who's a very, if you know him, he's a very cantankerous guy, but he was sort of like down on comics. He had written in comics for a while, kind of traditional comics, but his whole thing was like, okay, now that we're doing these dark, grim comics and everyone's taking them so seriously, what would it be like if we actually took this idea seriously and said, like, what would it be like, or what might our world be like if we had had these sort of beings come along? And which, again, yeah, we've seen things do it since, and maybe there were things before that tried to touch this idea, but in general, I think Watchmen was the one that kind of, it's one of those comics aren't just for kids anymore
Yeah.
comics. When it came out
yeah,
in 85, I guess it was a real, I don't know, it was along with like the Dark Knight Returns and maybe a couple other things, Batman Year One. DC really was kind of on fire with the sort of like, this is a containable run that you can print in one book, and you're going to buy that in a bookstore. Like, I don't know when they started selling trades of comic books in bookstores, but I know that the ones I just mentioned were some of the first ones, and Watchmen was kind of just taken seriously, like a work
Yeah.
of literature in a way that a lot of comics aren't. And in some ways, it's so dense, Ronald. Wouldn't you say, as a comics reader, that like it is almost an argument for how you can't ever really capture the quality of a great, if something works perfectly as a graphic novel,
yeah,
you can get close, but you can never quite capture what's on the page in a movie. You can do it in a different
yeah.
way. Like Zack Snyder's movie is very faithful in certain
It's so
ways.
faithful, and so is this.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is extremely faithful down to the
Yeah,
look, but I just mean even
yeah,
Zack Snyder kind of being the visual stylist that he is, he
yeah,
did something very, very true to the comic in a way, but
yeah,
not in another way, because his visual style is so bombastic, it doesn't fit the kind of deconstruction that the moody deconstruction that the comic is. And I think this version is a little bit closer to that sort of almost noirish tone
yeah.
of these kind of grimy scenes between people, without the sort of spectacle. It'll get there, but yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess that's kind of the argument against Zack Snyder's adaptation, is that you're right, it might be a little bit too bombastic. It might not be as nuanced. And that's kind of what I think you're getting at too. Like I implore anybody that's ever wanted to read comic books or had any interest, this is one of the better ones I've ever read. It's just really sharp, interesting. It has a lot of action, and it has a lot of like things that make you question the
Yeah.
morality of some of these people. I mean,
Yeah.
there's an assault that happens that's spoken on. I think the movie does it a little more graphically, but
You
yeah,
mean the
there's
movie,
this.
the Zack Snyder movie, or
Oh yeah, oh
this
yeah.
animated version?
These are both movies.
Yeah,
The live action
yeah,
movie does a little more graphically, but yeah, it's interesting. I've always been very attached to, this idea anyway of who's going to police these people that are the most powerful people on planet.
Yeah, who watches the Watchmen?
Who
Being
watches the Watchmen?
the kind of buzz phrase that is like graffiti in the film. But it also does that thing. I feel like a few superhero kind of not parody. What would you call this? Like satire, but it's like a dark satire of like superheroes, you know. But like a lot of things have dealt with that idea of what would we actually do if we had these kind of super beings. And Watchmen is kind of unique because it has a lot of sort of street level heroes. With like karate chops and gadgets and stuff,
Yeah.
but there's only one really like mutate, like a guy who's basically a mutant whose power set is so expanded. He's like one of those super overpowered characters from the comics. And I think that the fact that you've got Dr. Manhattan in there, it makes these other things you don't really think about the fact. I mean, maybe Adrian uh Veidt is like meant to be like super intelligent in some kind of extra special way. But other than that, there really aren't that many characters that are superheroes in the strict sense. So that makes it kind of the moral question is really, it's a lot like I was saying about the dragons on House of the Dragon, where if you have a Dr. Manhattan, then you basically have the atom bomb. You know, you basically have a weapon that can't be beat. And what that does to the world and the fear that people have because of that. Like we've seen people explore that, but I think Watchmen does it in a uniquely kind of moody and downcast and sort of depressing way. Steve, what was your first exposure to this? I know that you haven't read as many comics as we have, but I'm sure you were aware of it just as a guy who knows pop culture.
Yeah, I mean, I'd always like, you know, the iconography of it and even the characters. I had awareness of it and who the characters were. And I guess the story in general, I had never read it. I actually watched, I did read it after seeing Zack Snyder's Watchmen.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, it's incredible. Honestly, I'm a fan of pretty much everything I've ever consumed that has to do with the Watchmen.
Yeah,
I would say don't forget HBO's adaptation as
amazing.
well.
So good.
Like that is like top tier HBO production for me. Like that was So honestly, like it's, you know, there was a general awareness just from like the pop culture waves that it had, you know, made. And then I really enjoyed Zack Snyder's and even the whatever it's called, like the director cut, the extended cut, I think is incredible of it. And then read the graphic novel or the comic. And then, you know, I thought HBO's was great. But yeah, this is just like another thing where I love the alternate reality of, you know, the 80s and, you know, there's events or like, you know, kind of in the same orbit of things that this reality that we live in has experienced. And I love the idea of like the multi-generational approach to what the superheroes do or didn't do, and how they approached the way that you know, they took on that mantle of like taking care of everybody or protecting everybody or whatever they saw it as being, whether that was being leveraged by the government or by local municipalities or just their own set of morals individually. I also thought that was like so interesting and gray. I like that piece of this movie or this source material even. But yeah, I don't know. I just like watching this version, the animated version of the Watchmen. It's just like there's nothing really truly different about the experience of watching it. It's like another option of seeing how faithful something could be to the source material,
right?
In this animation style and kind of like looking like the graphic novel or the comic looks is really fun. And I thought that was great. I really liked all the, you know, the voice performances were really good and really interesting casting, and what they were doing with their voices were really interesting. But all in all, I think my big takeaway was like, this is a fourth experience of watching this story and still being like, I fucking love this story.
Yeah.
You know, like I feel like it's just 4 for 4 and maybe you just can't get it wrong because it's so good. Like the source is so good.
Yeah.
And, you know, splitting it into two halves, like John was kind of saying earlier, I don't know what the best demarcation points of the source material was going to be to make the best adaptation of it. I'd say the one thing is like in trying to figure out if it was 2 or 3 parts, or it seems like I've read the same that it was 2 halves. But if this comes out in like 6+ months from now, like that's the big downside of me watching this. When I looked it up and it was like 2025, that to me was the thing where it's like, oh God, like,
you know,
what was the right way to approach this? Maybe like an episodic show or something, you know, but I hate that feeling of like, I know the story, but I'm so into this approach to the story that I want to see the second half like now, and I can't. Which kind of that's the only downside of this experience. But I thought this part one, chapter one, was awesome. Honestly, like I couldn't stop watching it. The day you picked it, I like got it, and I was watching it that night, and I was like, "This is fucking great, man." The
Yes.
story is so good.
Well, I kind of saved it, but I knew I was going to be able to get into it. And then when I saw that it was 88 minutes or whatever, and then I saw that it was supposed to be half, I really was wondering, how is this not going to be kind of rushed? And I think you'll notice some
Yeah.
things they really faithfully adapted. I feel like most of the first issue is very faithfully adapted. Everything up to the sort of they've kind of set up the world, and there's just a little bit of a like a reveal, and then we move into the kind of generational aspect of the women and
Right.
the mother daughter relationship. But I thought, oh, okay, so maybe this is just the first three issues, because that's what you had said, Ronald, and it felt like, oh, that was about a half hour for an issue. Okay, they're doing a really faithful version of this, and then it started moving things around more, and I was like, oh, okay, I see kind of what they're doing to make this maybe a little more cinematic. It doesn't feel like they cut anything that was super, like most of the things that I was looking forward to seeing, I saw hinted at in the this is becoming a thing now, these movies that end with a trailer for the next part, but the trailer that was after the credits
Yeah.
showed a lot of things that I was like, oh, okay, so they are doing this point or that point, but it's just not in this part. So yeah, I wondered the same thing, Steve. Like, it almost felt like an arbitrary stopping point. It wouldn't have felt so weird if we were going to get an episode next week, or if it was going to be a month from now that the next part drops or something.
Yeah.
The fact that it's an ambiguous moment, it did sort of feel like, I wonder why they ended it there, unless they just ran out of, like, I don't know. It didn't feel like an orchestrated, like, they didn't make it into like two complete halves where it leaves you with a complete feeling. It was definitely an open storyline with a cliffhanger. So yeah, I wondered about that decision, and I wondered why. But I don't know. I think that, like, the animation style is something that I'm still getting the hang of. I thought there were some parts where, like, when people were walking into a room where it was glidey and it looked like they had like a really simple computer model that they were animating over for some parts. But
Right.
a lot of times it reminded me a lot, actually, of the What If animation that has been on the Disney Plus show, where it's like there's moments of really dynamic, like, line drawings and action that looks really like old-fashioned animation, hand-drawn animation applied to comic book panels, and it's just really glorious to see when that really works. And then there's the kind of stilted parts. This is a talky story, so there's a lot of people just walking into a room talking, so maybe there's not as much crazy animation that has to be done. I think the style works for the sort of, let's look at this as close to a moving comic book as you can get.
Right.
But I still think that, like, there was something about that would occasionally bump me with, like I said, if you just notice when, like, two characters would walk into a room or one character would walk away, there would be this kind of, like, as though they were putting lines over a very primitive animated model that was moving a little too smoothly. But but in general, I think it's a pretty successful approach. Like, I remember thinking that was one of the things that made What If interesting, was when it worked, the look was really cool.
Yeah.
And when it doesn't work, it does feel like, oh, this is a new form of, I mean, I'm not really knocking it. I guess I'm just saying this is a new era of a kind of budget animation they can do that's not quite fully animated in a CGI sense, and it's definitely not fully hand drawn, and it's not this brilliantly orchestrated hybrid the way that Spider-Verse, those movies are. But it does have moments that really pop visually. So whereas there would be occasional shots I'd be like, that didn't look so great, there would be another shot that was just like really beautifully lit, like the moment when Rorschach comes into the comedian's apartment through the window to investigate. There's like a shot where he kind of perches on the windowsill and he's like barely lit by this like neon light. It was just really cool animation, and it reminded me, kind of on the heels of watching The Plague Dogs, it reminded me at times of that sort of approach to, like, okay, maybe these people don't have 300 animators working for a year to make this as beautiful and full as it could be, but there's a dynamic visual sensibility that you can definitely see come through that. I'm glad to see animated movies. I mean, it's an adult animated film, and you, like you said, Steve, we know the story. It's not knocking us out with where it's going in terms of that. It's just a really kind of nicely executed version of this. And I do think, we should mention once again, the voice actors in this are pretty cool, and it's a nice mix of people who seem like voice actors, and maybe kind of, B movie actors who have moved on to voice acting, and a few people that are sort of big names. But I thought that was a kind of nice approach to it, where I was like, oh, I'm hearing voices and I'm looking the person up and I'm seeing that what they've done is a lot of animation voices, not
Yeah.
necessarily a star-studded cast. But it does have Matthew Rhys as Night Owl, and he's great. I mean, I wondered how his voice would work for that, but he's got a really, it's like you could totally feel his sort of performing, his charm as a performer comes through in the animated form. So yeah, but yeah, I wish I knew when we get part two.
Yeah, I was bummed. I mean, I knew that there was, yeah, okay, this is part one, chapter one or whatever. I'm still watching. I'm like, I need more.
Right.
It was very, very,
Well, I mean, I
very
think if it
good.
had been like 2.5 hours, you wouldn't feel that way.
No, no, I wouldn't.
But the fact that it's an hour and a half makes it feel very like brisk.
Yeah, there's such a simple shot that I loved from the comic books where Rorschach is in Night Owl's apartment with the beans,
I love it.
and his mask is it's like hungry.
Mm-hmm.
His broken kind of speech. I mean, it's not broken. It's like real, like to the point. And I loved when they showed him prior how his voice was a little different. Like he was a little less jaded. He was before he started losing all of his friends. He was a little more like, you know, ambitious and happy about the world, and
Yeah.
it's cool stuff like that.
I love the little at the end of that scene. I just looked up to make sure I got the line right where Night Owl asks Rorschach as he's leaving, those were some great times when we used to team up, whatever happened to them. And Rorschach says, "You quit."
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's just so like,
Okay.
because Rorschach is that great stealth, he's everything wrong with the world character, but you kind of like him and you kind of root for him, but he's awful. Like, especially in this one, they lean into how like reactionary his ethos is and how much he takes that kind of vigilante idea and really exposes you to the sort of, like Dirty Harry or Travis
Yeah.
Bickle or any of those guys that we think of as like vigilante justice. They all would have a very kind of reactionary, sort of right wing kind of angle to them. So some of the stuff that Rorschach says that feels like it's taken from that playbook, it's like, oh yeah, he doesn't like the dirt on the street, and to him, the dirt includes a lot of the people on the street.
Yeah.
But I think he's an interesting character. But I don't know, I can't see him and not think about how many people seem to miss the point of him. And maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like a lot of people think he's like a cool vigilante and kind of the hero of the story instead of like he's a doomed tragic figure that we like in some
Yeah.
ways, but we also see how terribly broken his worldview is. Which again is a thing Alan Moore was interested in doing. He was like, I'm going to take the cool vigilante, but I'm going to show people that this guy is like
Right.
truly dangerously nuts and not someone you should admire necessarily.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean the story doesn't wrap around that kind of friendship and, I don't know. There are moments of lightness and levity and like friendship in the story, but it's a pretty bleak it's a pretty bleak vision of the world. And I think when I was 13 or 14, whenever I started reading it, it hit me really hard because I just hadn't read that many things that were, that many comics at least that were that just grim.
That scene with the woman he got pregnant hit me so much harder.
Oh, the
Like,
comedian.
yeah, the comedian
Yeah.
when he's like
Oh,
in the
yeah.
bar. It felt different. And he's like, you could have stopped it. You could have made the
Oh man,
gun
that's
turn
crazy.
this- I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah.
what?
If people don't know and have no intention of watching it, there's a moment where the comedian, another guy who's just a real scumbag, but there's some weird soul to him because he's so full of regret. I don't know. It's one of the more powerful versions of that I can think of that I've seen. The guy who's awful, and yet there's something about him that you see why people like him, and you see all sides of him, and the story judges him. Of course, he's terrible, but it lets you judge him. Like, it lets you come to those conclusions just through watching his behavior. It doesn't
Yeah.
I mean, he's a pretty unambiguously awful guy. But the worst thing we see him do in part one, well, let's make a list. But the most sudden moment of violence when he shoots the woman that seems to be carrying his child just to kind of clean up the situation.
Yeah.
That moment is insane. And yeah, it was really, I mean, that moment of violence, like I was thinking, oh yeah, this is why this is an adult story. This violence is not the, fun kind of action fighting. This is like,
Yeah.
She breaks a bottle and takes it to his face, and then he shoots her, and it's like shit. But that what he says to Dr. Manhattan is insane. Like, if you really cared so much, you could have turned the gun to steam. Um,
Yeah. It also made me realize that I really liked Matthew Dean Morgan. Is that
Jeffrey Dean
Jeffrey
Morgan.
Dean Morgan.
Jeffrey Dean Morgan? His
Well, he was great at that.
portrayal, yeah, and Billy Crudup's Dr. Manhattan.
That cast is pretty great.
Yeah, casting that live action movie is just out of this world, man.
Yeah.
Patrick Wilson? Are you kidding me? I mean,
Patrick Wilson was so good.
I liked him then. I think I love him now. So I think if I saw that movie now, I would be even more locked in. But I think he does a great job of kind of like, when those we all know when those good looking actors relax their gut and stick their gut out.
Yeah.
It's an insult to those of us who have to hold ours in. But no, I don't even know if I thought about Patrick Wilson that much at that point, and now I have such an appreciation for what he does after Fargo and the Conjuring movies and all that, where I've really come to love him. So, but no, I think this is like you kind of hinted at it, Steve. This is another version of a story we've seen well, and everybody who does this seems to be trying to show in some way some kind of fealty to it. Now, the Watchmen show on HBO was the least faithful, but in other ways, kind of spiritually, thematically, maybe one of the most faithful, because it got to do in one season, it got to kind of do what the graphic novel did, which is tell its own story on its own terms and not lead to anything and not apparently connect really directly to anything. So I really like the way that show approached the spirit of the book. I don't know if that might be my favorite version, but of the other, I don't know. It's tough to say. Like, I like something about the Snyder version as well as this. It's fun to like just talking about it. Think about that cast. I could watch that movie now easily.
Me too.
I think the HBO version of it, only because it had so much room to like kind of open up, and they kind of did their own thing with it a little bit. I just feel like, and I don't know, I just the way it tapped into like a historical events a little differently, like in this reality, and ties it into that, like that I thought was really relevant to now, and just like the last two episodes, I felt like of that series was just like I was just floating watching it. I felt like like much like the character in the episode, I was floating.
Yeah, no, the scene, the shootout scene, that whole scene is so incredible, and I think the way that storyline is sort of the romance of that feels really powerful in the television version, and that's where you get the Regina King is so great in that, and Tim Blake Nelson is so great in that, and Gene Smart's in that, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's just a fantastic cast. People that we now know are ringers. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the one that if I had to say which one is like, because of the way they updated it, and even the way they brought it around to like the sort of secret history that linking it to a different kind of history, and opening up the writers' room. That's one of those famous examples of where Damon Lindelof has said that that season definitely benefited from him listening in the writers' room rather than trying to run the show with his own ideas from the word go. So
I want to rewatch that. I feel like I want to watch the live action movie and then I'm going to watch the TV show right after.
I mean, let's do a little. We'll check in. We'll do a little.
The question is, who watches the Watchmen? It's movie schmovie.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Who watch 'em all's the watch 'em all. The watch 'em all men. That's what we are. No, thanks for picking this one. I initially was like, I don't know if I'm ready to watch another version of Watchmen, like when you first picked it. But then kind of what Steve said, once I started thinking about, an animated version of this story that, like, it was very easy for me to sit down and start watching it, just knowing the strengths of this thing.
Yeah, that was cool, man.
And yes, read the comic, folks, if you are at all curious. It's as good as they say, and it's an interesting thing too, because I was looking at the comic. I guess the comic is still the best version. I mean, if I really am saying what's the best version, the comic. But it's interesting. The comic uses a 9-panel grid that's pretty rigid. Occasionally, they combine 3 panels into one widescreen panel or 6 panels into one big panel, but it's generally a 9-panel grid with 3 rows of 3, and they're kind of vertical panels. And so it's interesting to make a cinematic version. You automatically are breaking that vertical quality that the pictures have in the comic. I just was thinking about that as an interesting thing that makes the comic its own unique thing, because when comics have a rigid framework like that, it does add to the sort of feeling that you're watching a screen, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's just weird that it's like, it feels prescient that it's a vertical image, because now a lot of stuff we look at on our phones is meant to be vertical. So I don't know, it feels modern to be looking at a vertical rectangle when you're reading the comic. That was my attempt to get people who enjoy TikTok to read Watchmen. It's vertical.
Hey, TikTokers.
You got him, John.
Hey, those panels are vertical.
Is it my pick for next week?
Yeah.
Okay. There was a movie that I've been really looking forward to watching. I think it came out this year on digital finally. But you can rent it on, I think, all the platforms. But it's a documentary called The Speedway Murders. It's basically it talks about, it follows the unsolved murders, the Burger Chef murders, which I had read about in the past, or one of the True Crime podcasts I've listened to mentioned them. But it happens in 1978. There's basically 4 teenagers working at a place called Burger Chef in Speedway, Indiana, and there's basically a robbery gone bad, or something gone bad, where these kids were killed, and it's remained unsolved for 4 decades. And this doc is basically re-examining it and giving it the the good old true crime treatment. So I'd seen a trailer for it on I think it was on Twitter. Somebody posted it, and then a couple critics that I follow on there had been tweeting about it in the past month or two, I guess because it became digitally available. But yeah, it's on all the VOD platforms. It's called The Speedway Murders, and we'll talk about it next week.
All right.
Cool.
Dipping back into the good old true crime doc.
Honestly,
that I love to go to.
I'm not joking, Steve. When I thought about the fact today, I can remember what I was doing. Because we had Mexican last night, and I was heating up the refried beans. I was reheating the refried beans. And as I was eating those with the chip impatiently, because I hadn't reheated it yet, I thought, Steve and I like true crime more than Ronald. And it's been a while since we've talked about true crime on the show. And then I thought, I honestly thought, I wonder if Steve's going to pick a true crime thing at any point.
Wow.
Because I was just it just had been a while since I myself have seen something. Nikki and I tend to watch that stuff when it comes through, but there hasn't been like that, you got to talk about it show in a while. And I wonder if it's kind of cycled through like a lot of genres where not as many of the streamers are determined to have a new one every month like they were for a while.
I think you're right.
But I still think it's possible for something to trickle out that will be really well done and interesting. So yeah, I'm kind of, I had it in my brain. I wonder if we'll ever watch a true crime thing, or if soon Steve will pick something.
Yeah, let's do it.
But also it's nice to do an animated and then a documentary. Look at the breadth.
Look at us.
What we do.
Spread the love.
We don't just talk about slashers.
Somebody was listening to this like, God damn it, they're gonna do another slasher.
Are they gonna talk about Halloween again?
Oh god.
Well, I mean, it's interesting though. After talking about Halloween so much, here's a great segue. As I've always said, that's the sign of a great segue, is if you say that in the middle of your
here's
but
a
like
segue.
The Alien franchise is another franchise where they have taken a lot of different ways, different runs at it. Like for a while there, it was the franchise where you get a different director in to do a totally different thing. Then it kind of became Ridley Scott's franchise again. And those movies are sort of divisive, Prometheus and Covenant, but I love them. They've also got Alien versus Predator. So I don't know, there's a lot in the air about Alien, and there's a lot of sort of, you could easily do a watch 'em all with that series and have a similar sort of ride of like, look at what these 3 movies are. Look at what these 3 movies are. The way that it kind of moves through cycles. And then, suddenly we have a new one that is, I think by modern sci-fi epic standards, 80 million doesn't sound that expensive to me compared to other movies we talk about. Right. And it made back its budget and then some within a few days of being released. But Alien Romulus, our buddy Fede, is it Fede? How do you say his
Fede?
Fede, is that it? Fede Alvarez, who we love for the Evil Dead remake.
Yeah, man.
And he's done other things that are good, but that's the main thing that made us excited, I think, or as we said on the show, for his take on the Alien, whatever you want to call it, franchise mythos. But yeah, so this is an interesting movie because it has a lot of things it can pull from. And Alien is one of those franchises where there's always the threat that they're going to do oh well, these movies didn't happen, or well, these movies didn't happen kind of move. So I think my mind was totally open as to what Alien Romulus was going to be. All I knew from the trailer was it seemed to be preaching a kind of back to basics approach in terms of what it was trying to show us. But I don't know, I know that we've talked about these movies. You love Prometheus, Ronald. I have reason to believe you love the earlier Alien movies, at least, Steve. What one of you guys just jump in? What were your thoughts going into Alien Romulus, and then what was the movie like for you?
So I went in feeling good. I mean, the trailers were impressive. Just kind of scaling back the story. It's just like an abandoned ship. Let's go through this abandoned ship, see what's on it, and then craziness happens. So I was ready for that.
Would you call it craziness? Would you call it hijinks?
Hijinks,
Shenanigans?
Yeah, definitely shenanigans. And with that came a lot of Fetty. He's good at this sort of environmental sort of horror, like he's good at atmosphere. So I didn't doubt that Fetty would come through with that, and it delivered on a lot of levels. There were some issues I had some real issues with some of the characters and some of the development of that stuff, but overall, I mean, I'm not going to be obsessing about those flaws. This is a fun fucking movie, and I really enjoyed it. It was action packed. Some may even say too action packed.
Well,
But I like that.
That's if you were sitting in some kind of special chair that shook you around while you were watching it.
Yeah, so full disclosure, I saw this thing in XD box. So XD is Cinemark's surround sound. It's an enhanced version of the audio system. But then on top of that, this was synced to a D-Box sort of technology. It's basically I can only compare it to like a ride chair. Like you get in and it reacts based on what's happening. So if a ship's going, it vibrates. If the ship shifts, then you shift in your chair. It moves pretty violently when high pressure situations come up. So it was an adventure. So it felt like I was essentially at Universal Studios watching a movie, and it added something to it. But overall, I loved it. I honestly loved it. But again, I had some issues with it, some real issues that I love to talk to you about later. But
no, let's do that. I would actually like to talk about issue. I kind of like that framework, Ronald.
Yeah.
Talk about the issues in a minute.
Yeah, I think overall going into it, I was extremely amped for it. I feel like the marketing's been great. I think, this back to basics idea. I think even the idea in terms of how they've kind of tried to like present the film, not even the quality of the film, but just the production and like, where this film takes place in the timeline of Alien and, between Alien and Aliens and, the way they made the film and all the practical stuff. Like I like the way that they handled kind of trying to promote that and make that information a part of the marketing for the movie. And I think that really like had an effect on me and a lot of other people I know that I've talked to about it. So that really got me excited for it. Like John said, long time card carrying member of the Fede Alvarez fan club. I'm just always interested in what he does. Some things are great. Some are just very good. I don't know. Like I like a lot of the stuff he's done. And I like him in general too. Like listening to him talk about his process and just his approach to filmmaking is really fun.
Yeah.
And I really like the way that the idea of like kind of like a heist movie placed inside of an Alien film is just like, okay, yeah, that makes total sense. Especially when you kind of take it and you're you're I guess maybe approaching the idea of like the have-nots and the haves in some frame of reference, and like that's what they're trying to get. So you kind of root for them even more to
Yeah.
be able to escape that situation. So that framing worked so well for me to get me interested in the movie. Um, and I got to be honest, the movie's cast, like a lot of people maybe don't know a lot of people in the film. Most likely, Kaylee Spaney is probably the biggest name out there right now. She's had a pretty incredible last year and a half or so with Priscilla and Civil War. She was on Devs, a couple years ago as well. But honestly, like the thing for me, walking into it was just being able to see David Johnson, who most people probably know from industry.
Rye Lane.
And Rye Lane,
Yeah.
huge.
I mean, I've been loving to
of that
see
movie on this show.
the love for that movie that's popped up around people enjoying him in this movie. It's been nice to see people recommend, oh, you like him? Well, watch Rye Lane. And I've seen a lot of people basically say what I think our feeling was is kind of a perfect, sweet, modern rom-com, like a quiet classic of the genre.
100%.
And he's fantastic, and he's different in this. I think that's the other thing that's really great is that instantly, I mean, it's like one of the things you have to get right if you're doing an alien film, I think, is like if you're going to have the synthetic android, whatever you want to call him, character, it's got to be something. And it's like we've had Ian Holm, the real Ian Holm I'm talking about in the first one, and we've had Lance Henriksen, for Christ's sake, and we've had Michael Fassbender doing like some of the like best stuff in the franchise, and now we've got David Johnson, and it's like I want nothing more now than to see David Johnson's Andy meet up with Michael Fassbender's David. Like in my mind, that sounds like, oh, there's somebody who can actually maybe someone whose goodness almost seems like could compete with David's evil in a way that I just think it's very interesting. And I think David Johnson, if you know him, he brings a lot to that part automatically. But if you don't know him, I think it's within minutes you're getting the kind of soul of that character, which is crazy to say because he's technically a soulless character. But I loved everything they did with his, the different programming and his eyes changing. And I thought all that stuff when he kind of has his, there's a couple, one of the worst moments in the movie to me is when he quotes a line that didn't feel right for his character and didn't feel right for the movie either. But it's like those lines in, there's a couple of instances of prequelitis in the movie Solo, where like we find out where he got his name and that kind of stuff. You could just cut those parts out of the movie with your brain and you'll be fine. I found that the fan service stuff in Romulus was pretty easy for me to kind of go, but if they just hadn't had him say that, the scene would have been great and fine without it. It was just a little moment of like, I don't know if I would call it bad judgment or insecurity that they think they need to include some of that stuff. Maybe it felt cooler on the page. But yeah, some of that stuff was really clunky, but it really didn't do anything to hurt the character or the my feelings about the movie that much.
Right.
I gotta share this with you because it bothered me. I didn't like, man. Are we at the nitpick part?
Well, I would say let's maybe talk a little bit more about. Let's talk about things we liked maybe before we get to the nitpick part.
No, it's not a nitpick part. It's a big flaw of the. I didn't like. This bothered me the entire movie that he was like a Lenny character, like Lenny from Of Mice and Men. Like I'm like the black synthetic is here, and he's like, but I'm like, I could do without this. It bothered the shit out of me, and I know that it's probably going to bother other people. So I have to get that off my chest.
Oh, see, I loved that. Like to me, that made him so endearing. I
hated it, man.
That we found out, but we get different versions of him. I mean, later he's not that way later. So
I like the other version.
That's what I'm saying.
I didn't like the Lenny version. I love the.
Well, but I mean, is that a feature or a bug? Like that you're supposed to early on see him as like shaky and kind of damaged because the whole thing of him being salvaged is like a character point,
Yeah,
but I'm not arguing against what you're saying. I'm just saying for me that feels like part of his arc is all I'm saying is like that he starts off one way and ends up another way makes him interesting.
Yeah, I don't like the idea that like they're like this black one. Let's make them up and put them in our house, and I didn't like any of that. That made me really uncomfortable. And that's a trope in everything where there's a black person, where they're like, oh, he's he's a troubled youth, so come to our house so that we can take care of you. And I'm like,
Right.
I don't want to see this in a fucking space. I don't want to see this in space. So that bothered the shit out of me. But I love him. Like I knew from the trailer that he was a synthetic just because he's the only one that could carry this movie in that way. Like he's the only one with the acting chops to take this. I was like, somebody in this group has to be a synthetic, right? He's the one. Nobody can take this on the way that he takes this on. Like he is an acting force. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, he's
like,
great. He's
like kind of.
you can't
So-
you can't leave this movie and not feel. I mean, you could say whatever you want about like, they're both great. I think
Right.
I do think they're both great.
Yeah.
But I from 10 minutes in, I'm just like, yeah, this is the one. Or that's the character at least that I found the most interesting. I mean, even the arc of that character and the conversations about, the plans to leave him behind or have to leave him behind.
Man.
And
that was so fucking sad.
like the mathematics of like, how many people would live if one was sacrificed. Like the way that character just changes so much through the movie, in terms of an arc for a character that's even a synth or an android, whatever it's properly called, when you get a chip put in and new programming is learned, and and that's not even voluntary. And I like the idea of kind of approaching that even with Andy's character, because immediately he's in that scene when they place that chip in his head and he like looks up and his eyes roll back and everybody's freaking out and she's just like, oh, he's just rebooting. Like, I just love the tension in that because, just before that is when he's like hearing about the fact that they're going to leave him behind, and it's like such a switch that's turned. And for that next run of this movie, you get to see another flavor of this actor as this character with an element in the story added to make it even more rich. I love that, man. That piece of it was so good. And I don't know, like overall, like with the high expectations and going in as excited as I was to see it. I mean, obviously we were all stoked. We all saw it this, last week. Is very rare that we've all seen it and we released it the same week. I came out of it feeling like I really liked it. I don't know that I loved it, and I didn't love it mainly for some things, the issues that I had like in the third act of the movie. And not anything that made me like ding it too badly. It's right on that verge for me. And maybe rewatching it, I'd feel even better about it. But I was just really excited to see an alien movie in a huge like Dolby house in theaters, in 2024. I mean, it was just like a lot of fun to watch it. Also with the crowd, it was cool too. Like it was a pretty packed house. That was really fun too.
Yeah, I went to see it with Henry. And it was like a late showing. It was the Thursday.
Yeah.
And so it was a decently crowded. It wasn't packed, I don't think, but it was a reactive crowd, and that definitely helped with the sort of the type of movie this is. But yeah, there's just some things they do in this that are very clever extensions of stuff. Like, I feel like this movie is the first one, not the first one to make use of the acid blood, but this movie is like,
that scene was
if
awesome.
You're thinking about what they must have thought, okay. And again, knowing what Alvarez was able to do with like, Evil Dead, the way he was able to home in on the kind of extreme quality of the violence and the gore in that series, that like this had that same approach of like, what's something that can be horrifying? What's something that in an alien movie, you're supposed to get a memorable bit of gore or a scene of something you've just never seen before, and it's that mix of sci-fi and body horror. And I don't know, the way they work, they really exhaust the possibilities of the acid blood. Like, you see the danger of it. You see what it can do to a ship. You see what it can do to a person. You see what it can do in zero gravity. I mean, it was just really cleverly orchestrated. So yeah, I would say that, and it's funny that because I really love the third act. Like, I really loved how batshit it gets, and that felt very Fetty to me. That felt very like,
totally is.
This is what he does, is have a final act that is nuts. But I loved the the sort of nod to Prometheus that the movie gets to have in it, and even
Come on.
it's like a nod to Resurrection and Prometheus at the
Right.
same time. I thought the movie did a great job of exactly that, of like, okay, you're going to, and again, I'm not talking about the fan service stuff, the lines being quoted, and if you want to call it, I've seen people compare it to like The Force Awakens as like a legacy sequel that kind of plays the hits and throws in something new. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. I just don't know if I think this movie is quite that. And I love The Force Awakens, but I just don't know
Yeah.
that this movie is quite that. I think it's more like it's what you said, Steve. It's like the heist. It's like coming up with a, this series has gotten so huge and cosmic with the scope
Totally
that
it.
like this, it's a small story set
Pull
in this
back in.
world.
Yeah.
It's like that palate cleanser of like an Ant-Man movie after an Avengers movie or something. It's like, here's something that's just not going to get as big as Prometheus did, as Covenant did. And as much as I'd still love to see Ridley Scott's plans for David the android, the devil in android form, I also think it's cool that this movie scaled it back, but I liked how it made me think, oh, this is still connected. Like it didn't want to deny almost any of the other movies. There was something in it that kind of connected it to them. And I thought that was neat. And like I might be similar to you, Steve, in the sense that I walked out going, I really liked that. Not like I was bowled over by it and just I love it. But there's so many things about it that the more I think about them, I'm really I'm really happy about. And I would like I wanted to see it again couple days after seeing it just
Right.
so I could see it again. And I think that reminded me of like the way I used to feel about like a Star Wars movie or
Totally.
even some Marvel movies where like within a couple days I was like, I just want to see that again. There's moments that are that cool. Like I will say there's the one of the visuals I thought was amazing was when they're crashing into the
The
rings
ring.
of the
The
planet
rings,
and the
yeah.
ship is just grinding on the rings and it's just one of the most
It's gorgeous.
mind-blowing things I've ever seen. The scale of the ship, the
I
scale
know.
of the planet, and how
Yeah.
small they are, and what they have to do to survive. And I thought that action was insanely well orchestrated. And I also thought, like you said, that Ronald early on, the atmosphere, just the kind of the lighting, the mood, and I guess this would lead into how nice the movie looked to me. Would lead into one of my major pet peeve, which I'm going to be the broken record. Everyone out there has heard people complain about this already, so I guess I'll just get it out there. But I didn't think whatever the questions people have about the morality of kind of resurrecting a dead actor through CGI and through combinations of whatever they're doing, motion capture and CGI, and
Yeah.
I just
Right.
didn't think the effect looked good. Like it was it
You know when it looked good
when
when you saw it on the screen.
it did look better on the screen.
It did look really
but
good
it
on the
still looked
screen.
like pixels in the world.
Yeah,
Like
I
when it was
agree. I
cutting
agree
back
with
and
you.
forth between David Johnson and the android. I was like,
Look.
he just doesn't look like he's in, like he's not lit the same. He doesn't match the grain and it was weird to me that it was that, especially because they've always done synthetics as just an actor. And any actor would have been fantastic. We wouldn't have even have to have been someone that we've seen before, but knowing that there's a guy named Michael Fassbender out there that it could have been, that would have been pretty cool. I think it also might have been fine if it was another model of Andy. Like if we're trying to make this the movie where this all goes on, I just feel like
Yeah.
it was a
Yeah.
weird calculation. That's like the moment of fan service to say we're going to throw in this character from another movie, and that didn't matter to me, and therefore it didn't seem worth it to go to all this trouble to do this sort of uncanny valley thing. I've seen people defend it and say it's supposed to be a malfunctioning, glitchy android. It's not supposed to look real. But I think even before, when they've done malfunctioning androids, it's looked like it's part of the world. So that to
Yeah.
me was like, I just didn't like that failure of judgment. And it did kind of stick with me a little bit, especially given how huge that character is. I mean, compared to what I expected, it wasn't just one scene. It's sort of like one of the villains of the
Supporting,
story.
yeah.
So I think I would have appreciated that a lot more if it had just been like some cool British actor or some, if it's going to be a recognizable face, fine. But that just seemed like a weird choice to me. And I think that I've seen so many people bag on the movie because of that I'm like, okay, well, that the estate approved it, whatever. It's a matter of taste that I don't agree with, but I'm not offended by it on moral grounds the way some people seem to be. I just wish it was a better effect.
I think about the idea. It's funny you say that. As I was watching it, I was like, this was supposed to be a Hulu movie. I'm like watching this like,
Yeah.
God damn, this looks like insane. So like, while I did annoy the shit out of me that he looked kind of strange, and it's weird. It wasn't even that. it's one of the better effects that I've seen for someone that doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
But it's also the lower tier of the better ones, you know. So it's like I'm looking at this, I'm like, it
Well,
didn't
Ron,
feel
what
like
it
it
is, I
was.
think you nailed it. It's actually one of the better fake versions of somebody, but
Yeah,
that you take, it's still like you take the worst shot of a real
yeah,
person and
yeah.
it's still miles better than this. And I
Yes,
think that's the
Exactly.
problem with trying to blend it in this way. If it's like a crazy looking character that's not human, your eye accepts it a little bit more.
yes. And what it is related to is the animal part of our brain that deals with danger and friendly or whatever. Like
Hmm.
the part of our brain that can process, oh no, this is camouflage. This thing is trying to hunt me, or this is fake, or there's a booby trap ahead. You know what I'm like?
Yeah.
That part of your
Yeah.
brain gets nagging, and it's like, this is not right. This is not right. And that's why we obsess with it so much, because it's like, and if we were all hunting together, you'd be like, that is fake, and this is a booby trap. And then,
Imagine being like a cave person, walking through the woods. You're a woods person while you're doing that, I guess. But then
yeah.
you go back to your cave later, and then you see like pixels over there, and you'd be like, okay, this is a
Like, what
there's a
is that?
primal thing that kicks in. No, I definitely think you're right, Ronald. That like that's why the uncanny valley thing is so disconcerting. Is
Tough,
because your
man.
brain's
Yeah.
Yeah.
trying to make sense out of why
Yeah.
it's not quite human. And that's why so much of this AI slop that people share has that effect on me too, where it's like the closer it gets to a person, but it's not quite there, the more it weirds you out. That
Yeah.
it's like it's lacking something. There's like they can even imitate the light in someone's eye, but it's still not the same thing as the light in someone's eye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not just like emotional. It's like a one day we're going to be able to figure out what it is, but there's like a thing that we can see in living beings and living animals that we can detect very quickly. That I don't think they've been able to like define. It
Yeah.
maybe in some story they've said it's like the seventh element or something,
Yeah.
like some fancy term for it, but our brains can detect it. And it's strange you say that, because I really did see that person was like that. What the fuck is that? What
Right.
is
Like
that?
someone's trying to trick me. Right.
What is that? But I like the attempt, and I do like that. Prometheus. I think that Prometheus was so shunned at one point that it's nice to know that Fetty watched that movie and was like, "I like this movie."
Or at least
He's
I'm
like,
not going to disavow it, or I'm just going to
yeah,
throw
yeah,
an Easter egg out. It's like it doesn't make total sense
with the music,
in the sense that you're going to
even with
like, right. Well, I mean, I'm probably going to watch that movie again soon
hell yeah,
because I was thinking about it. But I do think it's interesting. For a few days there, it was kind of fun. My socials were full of people talking about the Alien movies, and that
mm,
kind of curdled as any kind of fan based discussion does on social media. So it got nasty, and it's like, well, maybe I'm going to have to start muting some of these words. But no, for a few days it was fun just to see people kind of reclaiming Prometheus even and talking about those movies. Now they have a little history on them. Now those movies are
Yeah.
10 years old, and there's something kind of fun about the fact that the series has done, this and this and this. And like, I'm excited about the Noah Hawley show, even though I don't know how it fits in with the timeline, if it's set before everything and it's on
it
Earth.
is. Apparently,
Um,
it's set right. There's a graphic that
yeah, I
think I
think
want to
but I
show
mean,
you.
it's like the earliest in the timeline, but it's on Earth and there's supposed to be xenomorphs. And he's said as much that he doesn't find the Prometheus covenant, that mythos is not useful to his story. So I think he's doing more of a Wayland Yutani corporate thing with the xenomorph running around, on Earth. So it's like that could be really cool, but I'm curious what that's going to do to the timeline, if it's going to break out of the story or if it's going to somehow subtly fit in. But yeah, no, it's an interesting franchise. I'm always, I think Alien is a movie my dad liked when I was a kid. He didn't love a lot of like horror or a lot of like, campy sci-fi, but this was one that he would talk about with sort of hushed tones, like it's just a classic film, really well done.
Yeah.
And so I think I kind of grew up feeling like it was great, and I've always had that feeling that an Alien film there's something, there's the potential at the very least for it to be extremely special whenever they add to this story. And there is something elementally horrifying. Talk about primal fears, the xenomorph or whatever version of it we get in different things. It's always, yeah, I mean, fuck them. You really wouldn't want to go up against one.
Yeah, yeah. It
The whole
was
idea of the apex predator, and it's kind of an animal, but it's also kind of smart, and
yeah.
there's a cleverness to it. I don't know. It's very
Or if it has baby teeth.
oof.
What the fuck was I looking? What the fuck was that? I wanted to
Yeah.
split on the ground. I was like, what the hell is this thing? Spitui.
I guess like kind of for me, I did really appreciate like kind of all these nods to the different films, or like even just the story beats of some of these other films in the franchise. I think where it kind of like just lost me a little bit in that final act. Yeah, it is crazy. It goes all over the place, but it almost felt like too much to me to try to say, okay, like it felt like they gave me like an alien ending with the xenomorph like fight. And
Yeah.
it felt like there was an aliens ending, with the guns and the, like, you
Right.
got the gun that locks on, and then you had a bit of, like you said, John, like a bit of a nod to Prometheus and Resurrection. And it's like, I guess it works. It's fine. But like, I just felt like I guess I didn't feel like it was building that far that quickly.
You didn't feel like it was escalating. You felt like it was just kind of adding on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it
No,
felt like it wasn't like, yeah, that's a great way. It was not escalating. It was just like, oh, there's another thing to deal with.
it just keeps going. No, I know.
Exactly,
I kind of
exactly.
felt that. Like I think when I'm saying I love how batshit the ending was, there was a sort of exhausting quality to it
Yeah.
that I felt again was maybe a thing that was working for me, was the whole idea of shit. These people can't. They keep trying to, like. It's almost like the credits started to roll and then we'll go
Right.
and something else would happen. So I think that might have been something I kind of enjoyed, but I do think I was starting to feel that, oh, this movie is getting, in the last 20 minutes of a lot of movies is when you start to feel the length of them.
Yeah.
And if there is a feeling of an ending like that false bottom climax, it's very Alien to do that. But it's
Yeah.
also that can make you feel kind of exhausted watching a movie where it feels like it just keeps going. The story keeps spilling out in different directions.
Yeah.
But no, I liked our lead characters that we got out of it, and I like, I can kind of hear what you're saying, Ronald, now about the Lenny aspect. I didn't see it as a negative of the character though. Like when I looked at Andy at the beginning, I didn't see him as like, oh, he's like. I just thought it was nice that she was kind of a humble person, and the only reason her family owned a synthetic was because it was like a broken one or whatever. I thought that was kind of interesting, but I do think at the end of the movie, the way they're very much like their roles have changed and they're kind of partners in a sense.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really cool way to, again, he's kind of the stealth lead of the story in some ways. And I think that like, that's just neat. I didn't expect that going in. And it does seem like you have to have a short brown haired white woman though, if you're going to have an alien movie. Or short brown haired, not a short brown haired woman,
Yeah.
a woman with short brown hair. But she was good. Yeah. And I thought that
She was really good.
there was a lived-in quality. I've heard people talk about the character types as kind of generic, but I don't know. When we got that first scene of everybody kind of hanging out, and it was like a young crew of new actors, I got kind of excited about that aspect of the movie. I liked the little crew, and I think it's fun to see that guy who plays the kind of asshole. What was his name? Bjorn. I thought it was interesting. I liked the fact that he was sort of the easy first kill, and he actually had a little more moxie.
Yeah.
I just thought that was an
I like
interesting
that too.
thing. Like
Yeah.
I felt the rhythm was he would be the first to go, and it would be an easy kill. But instead, he actually fought, and you see why he's fighing. I think there's
Yeah.
something that some people think is like subtle, but I felt like it was pretty obvious
Very
that
clear.
he was supposed
Very
to be the
clear.
dad
Yeah.
of the baby
Of his cousin.
that Kay is holding. And like what I didn't pick up on was that they were cousins. Like I missed that
Yeah,
line.
they said that earlier. Yeah.
But I did catch the sort of he's really working to protect her.
Yeah.
So I think
That
that
was
too.
cool.
Yeah, it's just kind of interesting. But I think that's kind of like the fact that he's not likable, but he is still doing something that you can relate to, and he's doing something that feels compassionate or empathetic or something. Even though the way he was doing it was terrible, it still is just like a wrinkle to that character that could have been a one note character.
Yeah. No, I mean, this was a blast to watch. I mean, this is a very good film. Like I had a lot of fun watching it. I can't wait to watch it again, honestly. Because it is a really fun, easy watch. Like it flies, and It looks amazing, you know, just yeah, it's just a really great movie, man. Like I'm so happy that there's like a great alien movie out that seems like it's doing really well. So that's awesome. And something else you got to appreciate too is like the ability to kind of like get you to care about characters, you know, and like that you maybe most times don't care about, even the ones that drop off early, you know, like I say, it helps that you start it from an idea of like a heist that is like the have nots trying to get it something. And you're just like, I don't care if these are like, you know, morally questionable people, but like they just want to get out, you know, like you
No.
can relate to that. You want something better. And that's not something that's new across the board, but like the way they frame it in this, I think really works for the movie. And I got to say, like, little details that I love. I love the idea of like them trying to get fuel for these sleep chambers that are
Mm-hmm.
being used to
Yeah.
keep another area cold. Like, and you know, you take that and that creates I love that inverse stuff. Like they're trying to get out and they need this to get out, but it's actually what's keeping the face huggers like frozen.
Yeah.
I love that. It's so good. It's so easy. It feels so easy to come up with a cool idea like that in that scene.
Because of course they don't know about the
Right.
face huggers and what they
They don't
are.
know anything. They
They
just
just know
walk
that
in and
there's
they're just
probably cryo fuel on this ship somewhere. And then when
exactly.
they don't get enough, but they have to go like that whole now we're in this deep, we have to go in deeper. I thought that, yeah, that was really
It's
well
too.
handled.
Yeah, you're more than halfway there. You can't turn around, or it's a total loss.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. Yeah, that all works so well, man. Yeah, definitely recommend for me to go check it out. And I mean, something like Ronald experience, those D-box things, and you know that crazy experience. That sounds pretty awesome for a movie like this,
It was
too. So
nuts.
maybe I'll have to get down there to try to see it in that while it's there. It'll probably be like in that for another week or so.
And then yeah, I mean, well, you know, watch it like it it's there's a lot of spread in the way people feel about the Alien movies. Fans of one movie may hate other movies in the series. So, you know, it's there's no telling how you might feel. I've seen people say, "Oh, I was going to go see this, but based on people's reactions, I don't think I'll like it." That's weak sauce. Go see it.
Yeah.
This might
Yeah.
be one of your favorites. I just wonder off the top of your heads, can you we can include the Alien versus Predator films in this if we want to. But anybody want to rattle off a ranking of the Alien movies?
Oh boy, I gotta look at a list. From my
There's
reminders.
7 in the series proper. If we include Alien versus Predator, that's 9. But there's 7. There's Alien, Aliens, Alien 3, Alien Resurrection, Prometheus, Covenant, and Romulus.
I mean, I mean, Alien and Aliens are so back and forth for me. I would like to I should have rewatched them before going to see Romulus, so I had a better feeling about this. But I feel like my gut is pushing me towards Alien still.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd probably go Aliens and then Alien Romulus. And then Alien what else? Alien. Well, no, then Prometheus, then Alien 3. What am I missing? Alien Covenant,
Mm-hmm.
Alien Resurrection.
Yeah.
Is that all of them?
Yeah, you got them.
Yeah, that feels good right now. I mean, on the fly.
I think I'd go Alien, Prometheus, Aliens, and then I feel like Romulus and Covenant are kind of tied for me as like where they would be in that next slot. And then after that, it would be just because as flawed as Resurrection is, it's got some of my favorite moments and beats and ideas from the whole series. So I would put it slightly ahead of Alien 3, which I also think is a great movie in some ways, moody and atmospheric. I just wish that there's some moments where the effects kind of fail the movie in a way, but I really think it's fun. And then I would say, I guess that's all of them.
It's all of them, yeah.
7. Yeah. So yeah, I would, and then I guess I would put if I was gonna add, I would then say Alien versus Predator and Alien versus Predator Requiem at the bottom of the list. But I like all those 7 movies, the proper series. I like or love those movies. Ronald, what's your ranking?
Okay. Aliens, Prometheus, Romulus, Covenant, Alien versus Predator, Aliens, Alien 3, Alien Resurrection, Alien VP Requiem.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the top four is pretty cemented, it feels like, or it's something around that ballpark.
Yeah. I think we all like Aliens. Prometheus.
Well, I'm saying though,
Romulus.
but to say of 7 movies, you have the seventh entry in the top 4. I mean, consistently among us. I mean, that's success. I think.
Yeah,
honestly,
that's a great damn movie.
That's a good success right there. And honestly, looking it up now for anybody, 80% tomato meter, 86% popcorn meter, like for audience score. That's bad. Great, man. That's really good for sci-fi horror. That's a high rating.
Especially for a movie that there is a lot of talk about the flaws we've talked about in this episode. There's people railing about these and kind of writing almost like opinion pieces about the ethics of the sort of digital resurrection of an actor.
Digital necromancy.
Yeah, digital necromancy.
Oh no! Somebody used that term.
Oh, yeah, I've been seeing it all over Twitter and stuff.
Which again, some people are saying that and then still admiring certain aspects of the movie. I do think people kind of like Fetty. I mean, I think that there's a lot of. I think I don't know. I think that some people love to hate a series that like this, like they like to have opinions about it. But I feel like there's something kind of solid. When we just mentioned all those movies, there's something solid and rewatchable about each one of them. Has something going for it.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. So it's in theaters. Go see it, everybody.
Yeah.
Check it out while you can. Anything else you guys want to mention that you've watched this last week before we wrap up?
I saw a movie called Oddity.
How was that?
Really pretty good. It's very odd. Like the texture of it and the pacing of it is very like, it's very like weird scenes, like moments where you might expect like a music sting or something or a transition, and there won't be one. And then other scenes where the sound design and the sounds, it's a supernatural thriller. So it's like what's happening on screen might be making this noise, or it might be part of the sound design. And so it was kind of an oddly paced movie in that way, but there's a couple of really, really solid scares in it. There's some really creepy moments, really creepy scenes. I think in the end, it's a very satisfying kind of ghost story, sort of revenge story. But it's a really odd one. I mean, I guess the movie's called Oddity, but I mean, beyond that, it's got an odd feel, an odd pacing to it, and some really interesting performances that really kind of carry it over. So I wouldn't really want to say too much about the story, except just to say if you're a horror fan and you're looking for that kind of odd, almost quirky, supernatural story that's got a few different levels. There's like a weird wooden statue that is a creepy thing in the story, and then there is like a murder mystery, and then there's a kind of a ghost story part. I don't know. It's got lots of different ways of creeping you out. Like there's a guy in a mask that's one of the scariest moments I've seen in a movie recently, and then there's also a ghost face that appears a couple times that really freaked me out. So it's got some really good scares, and it's an eerie, strangely paced movie. And I think honestly, what I was thinking about when I was watching it was, this is one of those elevated movies that's got the goods. Like this is like an elevated horror in the way that it's shot and presented, but it also has like good traditional scares and some crazy violent things that happen, and it's kind of modulated. Something happens every 10-15 minutes. Once it gets going, it kind of, it doesn't just kind of sit there and try to creep you out the way some elevated horror tries to do. This actually has some gruesome stuff in it. So
wow.
Okay. If I just encouraged you, I would say check it out. But
I do want to see this.
Get ready for like the first 10-15 minutes to be a little weird and off-putting and confusing, and understand that you're going to have answers to all your questions, before it's over.
Cool. I mean, you've convinced me. I want to see this. Yeah. I'm like looking it up right now.
Yeah, I've heard good things about this even before you said that. And then, when it came out, I did get it last week on digital, but I haven't watched it yet. So it'll make its way up the list.
Really cool double performance from the lead actress, whose name is, what's her name? Carolyn Bracken, who plays twin sisters. It's a cool turn.
Awesome. I wanted to mention the new Apple TV series, the Bad Monkey with Vince Vaughn. Really enjoying that. As of recording this, there's been 3 episodes released. So the first 2 came out last week and 1 this week. But this is kind of like it's a comedy He plays a detective or former detective who is now a restaurant inspector in South Florida in the Keys, who kind of gets pulled into this murder investigation and this world of corruption and greed and, crazy Florida stuff. And, but Vince Vaughn in the middle of it, and it's a comedy and it's very funny.
That sounds great.
And it's, the first 3 episodes have been great. Rob Delaney is also in it, and Natalie Martinez is in it, Michelle Monaghan, Zach Braff,
Jesus,
Jodie Turner-Smith. It's a really great cast.
That's a big cast. Yeah,
it's really.
It sounds like I was impressed by Zach Braff, but it wasn't that. It was just all the.
No, it was the Braff of it all. I know.
Not even a big Braff guy. I'm just surprised there's that many big names in it. No, I've seen people talk about this. Like, people seem to be enjoying Vince Vaughn kind of doing his thing in this.
That's exactly it, man. He's so. I mean, it's just he's the best at that, I think, and he's just like, that's a nice little reminder of it. And 3 episodes in, it's great so far. I think it's a Bill Lawrence show. I think I'm not. Bill Lawrence. But so check it out. It's on Apple TV Plus. Again, there's 3 episodes out so far, so you can get caught up and watch the rest of it with us, maybe.
There's this meme of Snoop Dogg. Just look up Snoop Dogg Don't Miss. I think about Apple TV. That motherfucker don't miss. It's like Snoop Dogg saying this for like, in the heat of battle, he don't miss.
Yeah.
It's very good. And I think about Apple TV, like I really like Bad Monkey. Like I checked out the first 4 episodes or so.
Okay, cool.
You have access to it. It's atmospheric. It's goddamn good. It's like he brings this energy to every scene that's so you think he's playing it one way and then he does something really weird.
I know.
Like what he did to the neighbor's house. Like what the
I know, it's wonderful. It's so fun. It's so fun, dude.
Yeah, it's incredible. I love it. It's fun to watch. I can't wait to see how it, winds up turning out. Oh man. To our listeners, real quick. Long Legs is coming out on PVOD.
Yeah.
If you hear the sound of my voice on a Friday, Long Legs is coming out. I'm really excited about talking about that, even though it's not like a pick that we had. I'm for sure gonna watch it and talk about it next week. I'm excited.
It'll be good to do a segment. I saw it and talked a little about it. Steve saw it and talked a little about it, but we never really covered it. So maybe next week we'll do a little, because I think it's worth talking about now that we all have seen it.
That's exciting.
But that's fun.
Did any of you see Cuckoo?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
I want to see that so bad.
I saw that too.
I wanted to get to the theater to see it. Like I was going to try to see it for this episode, but I did not.
Okay, well, we can hold that. I saw that too, so maybe we can talk about if anybody else checks. It out.
I will definitely see it.
I'd like to talk about that one. Yeah. Okay, cool. I'll save it.
Well, you're cuckoo for not mentioning that you saw it before now.
I didn't want to give too much away. I want to save something for next week.
Okay.
Dan Stevens. Oh, I also will just say I saw Inside Out 2, and
I can't wait to see it.
I cried 3 times. I didn't think it was great or anything, but the big Pixar moments that it hit were solid Pixar moments. Yeah. And the overall cleverness and inventiveness of the way they expand the world. It's almost too much going on. It's so clever and it's so packed with little concepts that have to do with the sort of world they created in the first movie. They expand on it and add to it in funny, interesting ways. But it was almost overwhelming how many new ideas they add to it. It didn't have the kind of simplicity of like the first one as far as the emotional through line of it. But the story is it's another relatable. I mean, you get the concept. It's another stage in the life of somebody, new emotions coming in. They really do go for the tear ducts in a few of these big moments. And as a parent who with a slightly older kid, but a kid who was kind of growing out of being a kid, I was not even prepared for how much this movie hit me in those moments. When you think about what a kid is going through when they're trying to parse, going from being a kid to being something else. So yeah, it really got me.
Very good. All right. Well, I think that'll wrap it up for this episode. Moviesmovie.com is the website. You can go there to listen to every episode we've ever done. You can subscribe to the podcast in audio form if you like, on whichever your preferred podcast platform is.
Yes.
And also, like I mentioned at the top of the show, we hope you're also maybe checking out the YouTube channel, which, honestly, like the YouTube channel may be the way to go these days, because we also have the actual audio feed going there as well now. So you can either watch the podcast there or just hit play and listen to it there also. If you don't have the ability to continually watch the greatness that we all offer visually every week, you can at least hear it, and you can still do it right there in your browser. So yeah, youtube.com/movie Schmovie podcast. And we will be back next week with a new episode. And as always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.